Welcome to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. I am your host, Molly Southgate, and today I'm interviewing
Sara Fujimura.
Hey there, how are you today?
Great, thanks so much for having me on, Molly.
Thank you for coming on. I can't wait to talk about your book. So, can you tell me about it?
So my new book is coming out next Tuesday on the 13th, and it's called Faking Reality. So this is my fourth YA book, my third contemporary YA book, my second book with Tortine, and my first book that required power tool research.
So can you tell me a little bit more about the plot? Then I want to talk to you about this power tool research, because that will be interesting.
Sure. So for people who are trying to decide what they like to read, I like to say Faking Reality is like the 80s movie Some Kind of Wonderful meets Kara McDowell's Just for Clicks. So it's a girl who has been on her family's HGTV show since literally the day she was born, and she's grown up in the spotlight. But now that now that the TV show is coming to an end, she's really struggling with who she is outside of the spotlight and what she wants to bring forward with her in this next life and what she wants to leave behind. So that's the bigger plot of the who am I and what is my identity. And then, of course, this is a romance. So I wanted to give her a cute boy who happens to be her best friend. And they've been best friends for forever. And her feelings change for him. And that idea for anybody who's ever fallen in love with their best friends, like, do you tell them, do you not tell them? Because there's a lot at stake. So you could potentially not only get rejected, but then lose your best friend on top of it. So that idea of what do you do when you can't be in the friend zone anymore?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I just love this book so much. I remember when I was first reading the description too, I was like, this is the perfect book for me, because Friends to Lovers is my favorite trope. And I love the fact that she's like on this reality show and trying to juggle the two aspects. And I really love all of the journeys, like talking about her identity and trying to figure that out. And I think that was very cool. And as a 14-year-old, I felt very seen, because I was like, oh, I'm right in there. I'm that age. Yeah. So you had to do power tool research. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so because Dakota works on this HGTV type of show, she's doing building, and I wanted to make a maker. I don't want her just to be like stand there and look pretty and hold the thing. I wanted her to be a competent builder, and that's part of her identity is the industrial design and how she brings art into everything she does. So it's not just I'm putting together a box. I'm making a thing. It's going to be a bigger art piece, and so that's how she moves along in the book, is where her favorite class is her art class, and her teacher gives them assignments, and she always goes above and beyond and just like totally out of the ballpark extra on everything she does, because her whole life is bigger, larger than life. So it makes sense for her that she would want to not be able to do things in a very small way. And most of the time it works to her favor. Sometimes it bites her in the butt.
Yeah.
But,
well, she lives in, as the book says, the McDonald's alternate universe too. So yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about how you created these characters, because all of them are very multifaceted and no one is just one thing, like I feel like they all had varying hobbies and different personalities, like they shifted throughout the entire book. How did you create that and plot that out?
Because I think sometimes people do a disservice with teens, and they think they're very one-dimensional, and they just put them in like little boxes of like, well, she's a cheerleader, so she's going to be this. She's a nerd, she's going to be this. And that's not true. That's not true of all both the teenagers and the college age kids that are in my life. They're multifaceted, and they move in and out of different circles. And I have a lot of biracial, bicultural teens and young adults in my life. So that idea that sometimes it's expressed very deeply, and then sometimes it's like I don't express it at all kind of idea. So with Dakota and Leo, I wanted to give them different facets in their life and also different things that they have to overcome. But one thing that's interesting is really they're the same character in some ways, because they both work in the family business. The only difference is Dakota gets a lot of perks, including money and things given to her, and things come very easily to her. And Leo works in his family business that is struggling. He works in a restaurant. So all the kids who work in the family business, I feel you, because I actually worked in my dad's restaurant for a little while. It's a hard job. But that idea that he understands her because he's in the family business and he has to pull his weight and he has to not have a lot of free time. But he doesn't have the perks. It's like I work really hard and I have very little to show for it. And so there is that push and pull between the two of them.
Yes. So working in your dad's restaurant, like how did that impact you when writing this book and like any of your future writings and like work?
because I worked in my dad's restaurant versus, somebody else's restaurant, that idea of expectations where like, I'm going to blow this off and tell him I'm sick, that I'm really going to a concert. No, because I lived with him. He knows where I was. So it's like, I couldn't like get off, or it's like, or if somebody else wanted off for like July 4th or something, it's like, okay, well, Sarah will take your shift. It's like, I don't want to take your shift. I want to go. It's like, no, you're going to take that shift. It's like, no. Okay. So that was a very short term thing. But what's kind of funny about this is I've come full circle in a lot of ways, because right now I work in a mochi donut shop. So I don't know if you've ever had mochi donuts.
Don't think I've had mochi donuts. I've had mochi before, and I love mochi.
Yeah,
I love donuts,
mochi has a different mouthfeel. So I work at, it's called My Mochi Donuts out in Apache Junction, which is about a 30-minute drive. And they make donuts, but it's made with rice flour instead of wheat flour. There is wheat in it, but there's mostly rice flour, so it has a different mouthfeel. But that idea that I'm back in food service, it was like totally accident. I work like one day a week for a couple hours just to help my friends out. But I kind of love it because I get to be like, Dakota in some ways, because I'm like decorating the donuts and putting like the sprinkles and the stuff. It's a different way to be artistic that is not me doing something on a screen. So it's not me working in Canva or taking pictures for Instagram. And I needed something that was outside of my head, outside of my house, and off my computer. So I just think it's interesting. It's like, okay, all right, we're gonna go back into food service for a little bit, just fun and different.
And it's a lot like the characters too. Like you've got people that are like the one's a pastry chef, and I'm blanking on her name right now, but one of Leo's sisters, Sasha, is a pastry chef, and like they work in their family's restaurant. Like that kind of like comes all around, right?
Their own interpretations of what the family business is. So Sasha, yes, she works and she makes especially like the mochi treats and stuff like that. So everything has a Japanese flair. So just kind of playing with like bits and pieces of stuff and weaving them all together into making 3-dimensional characters.
So what kind of research did you have to do into Japanese culture for this book? Because like there's a lot where they're speaking Japanese, or there's little bits that are written in kanji, and like what.
Yeah, so since this is a podcast, you can't see me, but I am actually a Caucasian American, and I am married to a Japanese expat. My husband is from Nagoya, and we have 2 biracial kids who are 21 and 23. So I didn't have to do that much research for that part, just because that's our life. And writing about Leo and his bicultural, biracial, trying to be bilingual family is like, well, that's us. I did have to do a little bit of research because the Japanese I speak, and I'm not fluent at all, the Japanese I speak is book Japanese, which you learn in class, and that's not how you would talk to family members. So I may have written it correctly, but it's not correct for the character. So a grandfather, barking at his grandson to do something would not say it in the really super polite way, which is what polite way is what I learned in class. So I had to have my husband Toshi like really look over all the things and say, okay, that's not right. Or yes, it's right, but it's not right. Use this instead. He would say this to his grandfather, or, he's being very short-tempered about it. So this is the one that he would use. So just being very careful with that kind of stuff, just to make sure that it is reflected accurately. And then also not just like everybody, like we're not like your typical Japanese American family, because we are biracial and bicultural. And also we're even different from a lot of our friends who are mixed race families, because usually it's mom who's Japanese. And so she brings the language and the culture with her. So I'm learning it secondhand. And so everything is just a little bit different, but it's the same. So, even if you go over to your Japanese family's house for New Year's, it might look a little different than ours did, or the way it looked in Leo's family. But just playing with those things and researching them a little bit more, the why and the how, and how to weave it into the story, just to give it doesn't make or break the plot, but it just adds an authenticity to it and something that is just fun.
Yes. And I've said this before on the show, actually. I'm of the belief that every single author should have people looking over their story, like making sure it's like culturally sensitive, that they got stuff right, even if they are a part of the group that they are writing about.
Very much. Yeah. Oh, I definitely agree with that. And even with Tortine, not so much this book, but the book before, Every Reason We Shouldn't. Not only did I have like multiple of my Japanese friends look at it to make sure I did it correctly, but even within Tor's system, they had multiple sensitivity and expert readers to see. And what was interesting is we didn't always agree, and it wasn't necessarily me versus them, but it was just like Japanese people think this, Korean people think this, Vietnamese people think this, or I sometimes had to explain, well, that was a very that was a very deliberate choice. And also the idea of like, well, okay, maybe that's not what you would say, but that's what I've heard at my dinner table. That was a conversation I picked up from my dinner table and brought it over. So being very mindful of what you do, but also understanding that there is not one story of being Asian, and especially there's a lot of different nuances. So making sure you do your research. The one story I have to tell you guys though that made me roll my eyes a lot was I go to a lot of different conferences, and I was at a romance writers conference, and there was a lady who she was an adult romance writer, and she had a book that had like the big torii. It looked like Miyajima. It probably was Miyajima. It's a big torii gate that's in the water. And there was a girl who kind of looked like she had a kimono on or something. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Is this, Miyajima? And she's like, oh, I don't know. I just got like a stock photo of it. I'm like, oh, okay, well, it looks like Miyajima. I said, well, what made you decide to write this book in Japan? Oh, my kids are really into anime. Oh, okay. So you talk to Japanese people, right? No, I don't know any Japanese people. You've been to Japan? Nope. No, my kids love anime. Right. So then I just Googled some words and stuff. It's like, oh, and then the kicker, when my eyeballs almost like rolled out of my head was, and I decided I'd write YA because it's just so much easier to write. Like,
no. It's a very oh god.
Don't make me hit you with your book because I want to. I'm going to walk away now.
Yeah, I've never met this woman, but I want to go and hit her with the book as well. So
please don't do that.
No, I won't.
But that idea is like you can write outside of your lane, but you must be very deliberate and careful and make sure that you are doing your research and being culturally sensitive. So that's my 2 cents.
Oh yes, definitely, and especially anime. But a lot of it is so anglicized too. Like,
yep. Well, even my Japanese teacher used to say, it's like, okay, guys, especially to the young men in my class, it's like, you're speaking in a very feminine voice, feminine, like the phrasing and it's like, you sound like a bunch of girls. So, and that was not a compliment from him. It's like, you are not speaking like adult men who are going to be in the business place. So, just knowing that there's different nuances and just being careful about what you're doing, and don't use Google Translate on anything. Yeah, I mean, even if it's just like one thing. So one of the other characters in Faking Reality is Alejandro Santos. And I do have two friends who are mixed Mexican American. So having them look at it and see if that it's culturally sensitive, and looking at the language, and just knowing that, again, from them that because they're a mixed family too, that there's different things going on that maybe is different than if you were 100% white or 100% Mexican American.
Yes. And something that I really love, and kind of like still what we're talking about, is how it really does come across in the book that you're like, one of the big themes of it is that there's no one way to be a certain family. Because even though Leo and Dakota are both Japanese and mixed, it's still, they have totally different cultures in their family. And not just because of the jobs that they have. Like, it's like, still, it's like just a different way because their parents are different people. And I feel like in books, a lot of times it's like, oh, there's 2 characters who are Black and they end up together and everyone else is white. And it's like, okay, we can have more people and like have a wider spectrum.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. And so like, can you elaborate a bit more on like how measures that you took to show that there is like no one way to be a family? Because that's a big thing in this book, as I said.
Yeah. So if you look across all of my books, especially the contemporary YA, there's different expressions of the family, even though most of them has like one white parent and one Japanese parent. But the expression of it based on how long you have lived in the United States, how anglicized or how Americanized that family member was. And it's just, there's not one story. There are cultural things that connect the dots for people, but there's not just one story. And being okay with the idea of not every Asian family has a parent who is the tiger mom or the tiger dad, or with every reason we shouldn't. One of the things is they're like, oh yeah, and you have the family expectations with the tiger dad and the tiger mom. Is like, no, that's not what it is at all. It's that one was a little bit different because I have friends in my life who had that 1 in a million kid who, like, Jonah wants to be the next Apollo Ono, and Olivia is deciding if she wants to continue her figure skating to go towards the Olympics. So those 1 in a million kids who might have what it takes to dance on Broadway, to make it in Hollywood, that how that family's life looks. And there's a difference between having a really talented kid who gets like, the star quarterback of the high school team or the best dancer in your dance studios team. But there's a layer above that. And once it starts moving up to the kids who are doing the travel teams or doing dances or, dance competitions around the United States, where it's a full family kind of event. Again, it's the family business where somebody has to take these kids because they're under 18. So if you're an adult, that's one thing. If you're going for the Olympics, you can leave by yourself and go train by yourself. If you're 16 years old, you have to have a parent with you. So now you're paying for 2 tickets and 2 people's food. And just that idea of like not wasting your resources, especially for people who are really banking on them. So whether they, give up their job or if they take a second mortgage on the house to make this dream come true. So it's not really about being a tiger mom just because they're an Asian mom. It's the idea of like, we're banking on you. So if we're going to do this, if we're gambling, you got to do it at 100% or we're not going to do it at all. So I think that people kind of struggle with that sometimes, that it's like, no, it's the connection behind it and the commitment behind it.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So kind of tracking back when you were talking about this woman at that conference that you went to, and you were talking about like YA and like how she said that she thought it would be easier.
Why is easy to write? It's like,
yes,
no, it's not.
So can you tell me about like what interested you in YA?
Because I love stories of hope and I love stories of transformation and I love stories where anything could possibly happen. Versus when you become an adult, especially the more years you have on you, the doors start to close. So even if I suddenly could get back to where I was, I'm never going to be able to be a Rockette and dance on Broadway. That door has closed. Not going to open again. When I was 20 years old, maybe. So that idea of like, the world is still open to you and maybe you need to change paths. And I work with a lot of teens and young adults. Things I tell them, especially when they do get like a door that's closed in their face, is like, be patient because sometimes you need to have enough space behind you that you can turn around and see how all the dots connected. So at the time it did look like you're going, back and forth and around. It's like, no, if you wait long enough, you will see how the dots come back together. And this is where you were supposed to be. And this is where you're supposed to come with these skills and these experiences to be in the perfect place that you need to be right now. But right now you might be like, I'm really hurting because that door just slammed me in the face and hit me in the nose. So
I think that is so beautiful. And in the book Faking Reality, like it really shows that. I love having a heroine who does not know exactly what she wants to do at the beginning of the book. And even at the end, she's still like up in the air, still has room. I think that's really amazing. And for me as a teenager reading it, I was like, yes, we don't need to know.
But do you feel like you're being pushed into a box earlier and earlier though? A lot of teens do, where like you start playing, like say you when you're about 5, you did all the little peewee teams and you tried football and you tried baseball and you tried swimming and then you were really good at swimming. So then swimming became your thing. So you did swimming all the way through. That's what you're going to, at 6 years old, you're going to be Olympic swimmer. You're like, wait, I just like to swim. And we don't play with that quite so much in Faking Reality, but in my last book with Toward Teen Every Reason, we showed that idea of like when all your eggs are in that one basket, and maybe you really do have that secret sauce that makes you that thing. But what happens when you lose that identity? So whether you were injured or you just weren't quite good enough and you got cut from the team, or just something that like that journey has stopped. And when it started getting hard, so the kids who have always been really good, and then they got up to the next level, maybe it's college or whatever, and they had their butts handed to them. It's like, okay, well, yeah, you used to be the sparkle pony in your circle, but now everybody can do that, and you're at the bottom.
Oh, so, the gifted kid burnout.
Yes, gifted kid burnout, or the idea of like, you are not as special as you think you are, because now you're up one level. And the people who are like, okay, do I quit? Do I keep going? And sometimes that decision is made for them. So whether they're cut from the team or they're injured, and they can be like, well, I really wanted to, but then, I hurt my knee, so now I can't do it. So that's why I wanted to play with Olivia, that idea of like, she did everything she could. She was the best that she could be, and it was not enough. And do you continue to push and go forward, or do you say, okay, I'm done? So that's what I wanted to play with, because I think that's very realistic for a lot of teenagers, of trying to decide, my identity has always been this thing, and now I'm going to college. Do I really want to do it anymore? Or have I lost my passion for it? But we've already put too much time and energy and resources that I couldn't quit senior year because my parents would kill me. But now do I really want to do that anymore? Or is it time to let it go?
Yes. And I love the themes in YA and like the whole genre, and this book of like really deciding like what to let go and what to keep. And in the book, there is like quite a literal send-off for her of her childhood and like this show that she's been on and her that hobby, a kind of not really a hobby, but like but I think it also like speaks to a deeper representation of that too in the book.
Yeah, or just that bigger idea of these are the things I've always been good at, and how do I weave them together to be something that is authentically me? So for Dakota, that idea that of being an artist, that yes, she can build anything, but being more of a functional artist or doing industrial design, because I think that's really special, because you have a lot of engineers who are very good at the math, but they're not creative people. And then you have like really creative people who can't like focus sometimes. So like the people who are that balance of the right brain, left brain, those are your superstars, because not only can they can dream big, but they know how to build it. So those are the people that you want on your team, the people who can actually do both things.
Definitely, yes. So kind of shifting away from this conversation, can you tell me a little bit about some of your favorite YA tropes?
So my tropes show up in my book. So my first book was Tanabata-ish, which is set in Japan, and that's the star-crossed lovers one. So when Sky went to Japan, it was like, I'm going with my family. I just got to sit it out, just make it through the end of the summer, and then I can go home, back to my comfort, back to what I know, back to the boy I have a crush on who will not give me the time of day. And did not plan on running into Ryohei. And that way that he changed her world. So that idea that they had to come across the ocean to find each other, and yet they were the people that they needed the most to like shake them up and break them out. And then the idea of, because they're star-crossed lovers, there's a time limit that the clock starts as soon as they meet, but that they cannot stay together. So with YA, and because it's a romance, it needs to be happily ever after, or at least happy for now. And I promise that you will get at least a happy for now. So
okay, I will read.
Their story's not done.
I'll report back once I read it.
And then with Breathe, which is my YA historical fiction, I love upstairs, downstairs romances, especially when the girls are upstairs and the boys are downstairs. So if you watch Downton Abbey with Lady Sybil and Branson, her chauffeur, it's that kind of thing. So we have our girl who is a debutante. She's a doctor's daughter, and she wants something that's bigger than the gilded cage that she's in. And she wants to be a surgeon at a time when most girls did not go to college. And then we have our boy who is their chauffeur. He's Marco. He's an Italian American. And people forget that only 100 years ago in 1918, Italians were second-class citizens. So that idea that he wants to have the American dream, and he wants to be a doctor too. So that dynamic of upstairs, downstairs, but he's a man. And in 1918, he can do things that she can't do. So you have that push and pull between the two of them. And then with Every Reason We Shouldn't, I love the enemies to lovers trope, and not enemies like they're really wrong for each other, but the enemies where the psychological kind of stuff of the person that irritates you the most is usually reflecting back the thing that you don't like about yourself. So that twist of like, oh, you just get on my nerves. You just get on my nerves so bad, and you realize, holy crap, that's who I am.
Yup.
And then you're like, oh, I do that to other people. And that's why, yeah. So that idea of like, you realize that you're nothing, totally nothing for each other. And then you realize we are actually totally perfect for each other once we get out of our own way. So
the only thing better than like having a book where the two characters are like mortal enemies for whatever reason is having them be enemies and then fall in love.
Yeah.
Even that, like, yes.
When you have to team up and you realize that you're better together.
Yes.
And then the trope for faking reality is the best friends to lovers. And especially it hurts to be rejected, but when it's your best friend, then there's more on the line that you could lose your friend altogether, or that idea of you want to support your friend. And if you've seen the 80s movie, Some Kind of Wonderful, that idea of like, you love them and you want to support them, but at the same time, every time you see them with that other person, it just like stabs you in your chest. But not in like a mean girl way where you want to sabotage them, but you like really try. You have to try so hard. It's like, oh, I know that I want to see my friend happy, and I actually like this other person. I think she's perfect for him, but I just feel stabby.
And she keeps being like, I just have to stay in the friend zone. I'm firmly in the friend zone. And it's like, no, you aren't at this point. Really? Yeah. So I just have one last question for you today before we go into our outro.
Okay.
And that is, when did you decide you wanted to be an author?
Not until until I was in probably my late 20s. So I started writing as a journalist. And so I did a lot of stories, and I love people's stories. And I love the behind the stories, behind the book kind of stuff. And I was doing a piece for Perspectives in Health, which is under the World Health Organization's umbrella. And they wanted to do a retrospective article on the Spanish flu, which now we are now all experts on pandemic living. But at the time, not a lot of people knew about it. So I had been doing some research for them for that article. And the stories that really stuck with me were the first person accounts. And you'll see a lot of those in Breathe. Like I pulled them right out of people's diaries, off their letters, out of their postcards, because it's the behind the scenes and how women had to come out of the tea rooms and the parlors and roll up their sleeves because the Red Cross is like, we need nurses. We need nurses bad. It's like, I don't care if you don't have any skills, like just come and feed people and help people. And so I love taking true stories and twisting them around and doing them. So I'm always collecting stories all the time in my head. And they're not like one person. So, a character's not based on one person, but that idea of like, I'm always pulling little stories and strings together and weaving them into something new. So I didn't start writing his book. So Breathe actually was one of the first book projects I was working on. And so that one got, because it required so much research and stuff, it kept getting bumped off so I could work on other stuff. But so that's how I got started. I'm like, I like this. And people ask me, well, don't you want to write for adults? I'm like, no, I really like writing because I want happy endings, or at least happy for now.
Yes. Oh, I really love that. I think that's amazing. So do you keep like a document with all of these like pieces, or do you just kind of keep it in your head, or?
Mix and match. I do keep like some pieces that I need for later because I love to do like blog posts or like kind of more Instagram blog posts kind of things now. But but I do a lot of behind the scenes of things that I've collected along the way. So even like today, I posted up a video I took. It was probably 5 years ago. That you'll see in Time About to Wish about going to the Japanese baseball. There's a scene in the Japanese baseball, professional baseball stadium.
Cool. All right. Well, I will look out for that because now I really want to read all of your other books too.
Thank you.
They all sound so good. Yeah. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on. This was really fun.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Molly.
Of course. So, quick plug before we go out. What do you have coming up?
So I have a couple different projects that are bubbling. So obviously Faking Reality is coming out on July the 13th, next Tuesday. I'm excited for that. And I have a book launch, an online virtual book launch with Changing Hands Bookstore, which is the July the 16th, which is the Friday. And then I am just signed the contract to take Time About to Wish and make it into an ebook. So I'm excited about that. And we are also taking Time About to Wish and making it into a manga strip. And so I want to take that story and do it in Japanese manga style. So reading it from back to front, from up to down, from right to left, and doing it from like a third person point of view versus in the book, it's first person. So this is the first time I could see inside of Ryohei's house or inside of his head, and having a lot of fun with that. So we are looking for a artist to go with it so we can pitch it as a package. So.
Oh, that sounds so cool. I always love having like graphic novel editions or manga editions of books that to go with
because you can do things that I would never be able to do in the book. So I can do like little outtakes, or this is what her social media looks like, or just a lot of fun. And so it's actually closer to writing it as a screenplay than it is anything else. But I've enjoyed playing around with that. Yeah,
that is really awesome. So when that releases, feel free to come back on the show and we can talk all about that too.
I would love that.
All right. For Read Between the Lines, my name is Molly Southgate.
And I'm Sara Fujimura.
Let's end this the way all great stories end. Happily ever after. The end.
Thank you for listening to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. This episode is hosted by Molly Southgate. It is edited by Rob Southgate and produced by Southgate Media Group. You can get in touch with the show at readbetweenthelines@gmail.com, or you can send us a voicemail at 708-887-9473. That was 708-887-9473. You can also find us on Instagram at Read Between the Lines Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.